The death of the elderly Antonio surprised everyone because the man, despite his 70 years old, felt great and looked much younger than his age. He was constantly engaged in sports, and 30-year-old guys could envy his energy. But his age took its toll, and Antonio died of acute heart failure. Antonio and his wife Elena had been married for almost 50 years, were quite wealthy, and lived in a large house. But since they could not have children, their faithful friend and family member was their young maid, Sarah, to whom they bequeathed all their possessions. To the couple, she was like the daughter they never had. When her spouse died, Helena was heartbroken, but Sarah was always there to support the woman. Helena arranged a lavish ceremony to say goodbye to her husband so everyone would remember what he was like. The news of his death quickly spread. Their family was known and respected. She felt that her husband deserved the best. The funeral was attended by many guests, including some of the most high-ranking and famous people in town. Indeed, their family had tremendous prestige. The elderly woman was inconsolable. Her faithful assistant was with her every minute, hugging and comforting the woman. Before the coffin was about to be lowered into the pit, Helena asked the gravediggers for one last look at her husband. She opened the top and bottom lids of the coffin to see her beloved's body thoroughly. At that moment, she saw an unfamiliar cufflink on her shirt sleeve. This caught her attention, and she looked closely at the other sleeve, which, to her surprise, had nothing on it. Still, in shock from the pain of the loss, Helena suddenly remembered that she had seen this cufflink before, and it certainly didn't belong to her husband. The woman hesitated about what to do. But not long after, she realized that she had to solve this strange mystery before she buried her husband. She ordered the gravediggers to stop and asked them to return her beloved husband's body to the morgue. Helena changed her face in seconds from an expression of grief to regret and resentment. The guests began to look at each other. No one understood what had happened. To many, it seemed crazy. But some thought it was just a reaction to the pain, a denial of what was happening, and the woman just wanted to be able to see her husband for a few more days. Be that as it may, the funeral was over, and people began to leave in bewilderment. The widow said nothing to anyone, not even her beloved maid Sarah, from whom she and her husband had long concealed absolutely nothing. Sarah insisted that the man be buried and allowed to rest in peace, but Helena categorically refused. And although the funeral company workers also asked what happened and if she was sure of what she was doing, the woman asked them to do as she wanted, promising to pay them double. Helena also specified that her husband should lie in a morgue where she could pick him up at any time. Helena thanked everyone who came to say goodbye to her husband, apologized, and said that dire reasons caused her decision, and that she would warn everyone when the official funeral occurred. Everyone present gave her their condolences, and the woman headed for the car. Sarah lost sight of her. She took a cab and headed for the owner's house. But to her surprise, the widow had already changed her clothes and gone somewhere. She didn't take a cab. Instead, she got behind the wheel herself. It wasn't like Helena, who very rarely drove a car, but today she didn't want anyone to see where she was going. 20 minutes later, Helena arrived at her destination. It wasn't a tall apartment building. Helena went up to the third floor, took the key out of her purse, and opened the apartment door she'd only been in a few times before. The apartment was tidy, but Helena began rummaging around for answers to her questions, and very soon she got them. In one of the drawers in the bedroom, she found a small box. By opening it, Helena found a second cufflink missing from her husband's shirt. In the box, Helena discovered a note that read, "Beloved Antonio, this gift I have prepared for you. I look forward to you finally being widowed, and we will no longer need to hide our feelings. With love, your Sarah." Helena was seething inside. She was in the apartment they had once given to their maid, Sarah. She remembered accidentally walking into her faithful assistant's room one day and seeing those cufflinks. She then asked whose cufflinks they were, and Sarah replied that she'd bought them for a loved one. These words and the note made it clear to the woman that her husband was not the faithful and sinless man she thought he was. and her helper was not like a daughter to them. They simply laughed at her, hoping she would die as soon as possible. Helena had noticed her husband's concern for Sarah on several occasions, but she'd always dismissed it as paternal feelings for the young 27-year-old. But it turned out to be something entirely different. How stupid I was. They were just waiting for me to die so they couldn't hide the love affair any longer, Helena muttered to herself. Helena, who was even more upset than she'd been at the funeral, took the cufflink and placed it in her bag before returning home calm and focused. The next day, the deceived widow went to the family lawyer and changed her will. After her husband's death, she solely owned everything, and after her death, all their property and fortune were to go to Sarah, but not now. Under the new will, she divided all the property among her employees, excluding Sarah, and ordered her to take away her gifted apartment, which was not registered in her name. When all the paperwork was done, she called the funeral company. She ordered that her husband's body be placed in the simplest coffin, and that the funeral be held in another cemetery where the poor are buried. When Sarah arrived at the announced funeral, she found only Helena and the gravediggers. She couldn't understand what was going on, or what her lover was doing in such an ugly coffin. She was also surprised that no one had come to this cemetery, which was so different from the private one where he was to be buried the day before. Helena opened the casket again, took out the second cufflink, and handed it to Sarah, adding, "Don't you think something's missing here, dear?" The girl turned pale, realizing that Helena, who thought she was her daughter, knew the whole truth. Sarah couldn't stand the woman's gaze and ran away. On the other hand, Helena did not wait for the burial of her husband. She could not find it in herself to forgive Antonio. Her whole past life had turned to dust in an instant, and she had to start over. Such a sad story. Tell us what you think about it in the comments, and remember to subscribe to the channel. See you soon.